Herbert Barber was an obscure Austrian writer. He was possibly born in 1892 in Vienna and worked at a bank at some point in the 1920s. In 1918 he published a collection of poetry, Pax Verse des Lebens. If he is the same Herbert Barber as the only one whose existence I found confirmed in records at the time, he would have fled Austria for the Netherlands in 1940, transferred from a refugee camp in Horn to the camp at Westerbork, where he died in 1941. In 1920 he published Spuk, drei fantastische Geschichten, which we shall review today. The story of Prince Nigrinsky has an old Russian emigre noble speak of a fief he held some distance from Moscow, which he never visited, being content to simply accept the word of his caretaker Ranin, and the reports he sent him annually. But meeting a friend in Moscow, he is informed Ranin is a drunkard and wastrel who habitually wastes his money, while openly mocking the absent Nigrinsky to all who would listen. Infuriated, he writes to Ranin several times, wishing for an explanation, but only receives letters asking him to have faith, but offering up no explanation or reckoning of any sort. Nigrinsky wants to leave for his fief at once, especially as his very pleasant company in Moscow had a permanent falling out with him and left him with nothing but regrets. But then the Russian winter does what it is known for, and he is hemmed in by sheer mountains of snow in Moscow. Until one day he simply decides to follow Napoleon's lead and ride out into a snow blizzard in Russia, because after all, what could possibly go wrong? Both he and his servant Vasily nearly freeze to death along the way, along with their horses. You'd think a Russian would know better. But just as they get lost, a strange, ugly old man who somehow keeps pace with them through the snow and storm runs up to his horses and starts biting them. Nigrinsky beats him with a whip, but only just about avoids smashing up, before coming to an empty inn in the village he owns, and there finding Ranin dying on a bank, with the marks of his whip all over his face. In a dream has Dr. Hieronymus wander about his house, reading the latest letter of his beloved Angele, who is somehow being pursued every night in a supernatural fashion by her husband, the banker Anselm Dunkel, in the form of a lecherous spirit whom no one can see coming or going, and yet who comes to her room every night, unseen by anyone else. As Wanderer ponders this, he looks at the Indian dagger Dunkel gave him for his birthday, and then picks it up and walks over to the Dunkel mansion, and bending over the sleeping hunchback stabs the banker to death. Awakening in a prison cell, Wanderer awaits to be hung the following day, but he is met in his cell by Dunkel himself, who informs Wanderer that he was hanged yesterday, and that he is in fact a vampire. Sitting on his back, the two glide through the air, arriving at Dunkel's mansion, where they want to go and share Angela now. But after biting her throat, Wanderer does not want to do what Dunkel tells him, and the two fight. Wanderer then wakes up in his home, but then he finds Dunkel had been murdered while he slept for real, and when he tries to console Angela, she casts him out forever, her neck showing clear bite marks. The rival has Lieutenant Frank win Lou from Lieutenant Baumann, after a short rivalry, the latter going to pieces. He challenges Frank to a duel, who refuses simply because Lou had already made her choice. All expect Baumann to resign, and he does by shooting himself in the head, but he leaves a note accusing Frank of cowardice. Frank decides to hold a mock wake for Baumann, but Lou, after spending time at Baumann's grave, shows up dressed as a white she-devil and accuses Frank of cowardice, making him accept the dead man's challenge. And the dead man does show up armed with a saber, followed by drunk and angry Frank, who is found impaled with his own sword on Baumann's grave. It is a pity Barber never wrote more, as these were all quite good.